I've been working with Philanthropia for, I think in total, almost 7 years now. And I have a lot of experience in fundraising, specifically from in countries like Nepal and Ecuador for grassroots NGOs. And today I will share a little bit of my experiences, especially in the field of developing a fundraising strategy with you. So I have a presentation that I will go through, and afterwards we have time for questions. You see this is in webinar mode, so you can put your questions in the chat box and I will go through them at the end, and we will have plenty of time for that. So I will start sharing my screen. And I hope everybody can see my screen now, and we can just go through the presentation. Again, if there's any technical issues, you can just post in the chat box as well, and my team will get to it. If you have questions, then you can ask me at the end. If you just type them in at the end as well, it's a bit easier for me to find them, because otherwise I have to scroll through all the comments. Oh, sorry, made a mistake. You can, if you have questions, don't put them in the comments, but put them in the Q&A box, because there I can easily find them. Sorry, I forgot about that feature, but that's much easier. So you can use the chat just to communicate with each other. And if you have a question that you want me to address at the end, you can use the Q&A box that should be next to the chat icon in the Zoom that you're looking at. Okay, so I think we can get started with today's presentation. The topic is crafting an effective fundraising plan for nonprofits, and we'll jump right into it. Yeah, I already introduced myself. My name is Eva. I'm a trainer at Philanthropia, and I'm really happy to be with you here today. This is actually our first webinar in 2023. We're just kicking off this year, and I hope you will join us for many more that are coming in the course of this year. Here on the left, you can also see a lot of the stuff that we offer, because we are a training company and we have many online courses available on our homepage. So you can go to philanthropia.org and check out our course program. You see we have different online courses. Here's just a couple of examples, like some specific ones, like fundraising from US foundations, a little bit broader, a project plan as a base for a successful proposal, but also topics like how to write a proposal, how to write a log frame, etc. So if you want to learn more about this, please check out our website, philanthropia.org, and you can see all the courses. And if you stay until the end in this webinar, we also have a little surprise for you, a little code to get some of the courses a bit cheaper if you're interested. So today, our topic is how to develop a fundraising strategy, how to develop a fundraising plan for your NGO. And the things that we will cover, that we will talk about, are what is a fundraising strategy. We will start with a definition so that we're all on the same page. Then we will ask the question, why does your NGO need one? Because often that also contributes a lot to understanding the nuts and bolts of the strategy. If you really have a thorough understanding of why you need it, and also if you are able to explain this to your seniors, to your board members, etc., because sometimes they don't understand why you should spend time and resources on developing one. Then we will talk about who should develop the fundraising strategy in your NGO and how to develop a fundraising strategy. So we will go through a couple of the leading questions that will actually help you to end up with a document that you can then base your future work on, and that you can then work with in your organization. If you have taken part in any of our other webinars, you already know this graph, this picture, this graphic, because this is something we always show again, because we believe that there are 5 main obstacles, main steps that you have to go through when you want to become a successful grant writer, a successful fundraiser in the field of acquiring grants. And in our opinion, they are first the fundraising strategy, that's step 1, and that's what we talk about today. Then we have step 2, which is finding donors, donor research. Step 3, engaging with them, donor networking. Then we have the question of eligibility, which is step 4 for us. So figuring out if you're really eligible for a grant. And then the fifth one, which is applying, which is proposal writing. So many times when we talk to people about fundraising, they approach us, they have this, this notion that fundraising basically is proposal writing. And obviously proposal writing is a big part of fundraising, but it's not everything there is to it. There's other steps that are extremely important that you cannot forget, that you cannot jump. So that is why we always show this picture. Today we're talking about the very first step, because you can see everything is centered around the fundraising strategy, because everything else you do kind of feeds into your strategy. And if you have this one document where you collect all your information, you collect all the steps that you want to take, and you share it with everyone in your organization, then your fundraising will be much more effective. So that's why this is step one. And it's so crucial that you have it, because otherwise, as you will see when we talk about what the fundraising strategy actually is and why you need it, is you will lack guidance. And this is something that you will definitely need. I just saw the first question in the Q&A box, if you get a recording. Yes, this is being recorded, as you saw, and we will share the recording afterwards in a follow-up email, and we will share it on our YouTube channel. So don't worry, you don't have to write everything down. If you want to rewatch it or share it with your colleagues, you can. Okay, this just happened without me doing it. So question one, just to start off the webinar, is, does your organization have a fundraising strategy? I would just like to know if you already have a strategy, if you've developed one, or if you're just starting out. Let me see. Okay, I hope I got the right one. I think you can hopefully see it now. It should have popped up on your screen. Yes, I can see people are clicking. So please let me know if your organization already has a fundraising strategy, or maybe you don't have one, or maybe you don't have one yet, but you are already working on it. That would be very interesting for me to know. So I'll give you 10 more seconds to click. But I think we have most of the answers. So I'm just going to finish and show the results. I hope you can see them too. Oh, these are neat numbers, 20, 40, 40. That's great. So 20% of you already have a fundraising strategy in your organization. That's great. But I'm really happy that you still joined here today to learn more about it, maybe learn how to refine it and adapt it. 40% do not have one yet, and 40% also don't have one yet, but are working on it. So this is actually great that you joined, because I hope I can give you a couple of pointers, some ideas and strategies how you can develop one that will actually help you and further your fundraising efforts, and make sure that everything you do in resource mobilization is well-rounded and has this strategic approach. So thank you very much for sharing this. So we will start with the definition. What is a fundraising strategy? The fundraising strategy is actually a document that details your strategic plans for fundraising in your organization. And it should be based on your business plan. Oftentimes when we talk to people and we ask them about this, they are not sure what this might be. And they confuse this with the business plan or with their strategic plan for their organization. Or sometimes they just send us the section of the business plan that says we want to fundraise or something like that. But that's not what is meant here. A fundraising strategy is a document that stands by itself and details how you actually want to acquire the funds for everything that you want to do with your organization. So which instruments do you want to use? Do you want to only acquire them through grants? Do you also want to do individual fundraising? Do you want to work with companies? Do you want to do crowdfunding? All of those things are detailed there so that you know how you want to finance the work that you want to do in the future. Obviously, and that's what we will cover later when we talk about the questions that you should ask yourself, to do that, it is extremely crucial that you understand what you want to do. So that's why you need your business plan. That's why your fundraising strategy should be based on your business plan, or maybe you're not calling it business plan, maybe you're calling it organizational strategy or organizational plan or something like that, but some kind of document that you probably have where you discussed your theory of change, how you want to go about it, and then also what you want to do. What are the kinds of projects that you want to implement? What are the activities that you want to do? What are the communities that you want to work with, etc. So you somewhere you have written that down, you have an overview of that. And this is what your entire fundraising strategy should be based upon, obviously, because if it's not connected, then you're making plans to raise money for projects that you don't want to implement, or you're making plans to raise money that is not going to be enough, or going to be too much, etc. So it needs to be this strong connection. It needs to be based, the one document needs to be based upon the other. And it will give you guidance. That is the main thing. It will let you know which steps you have to take, because often fundraising is very overwhelming. I think many organizations we talk to have amazing ideas, and they have so many great projects that they're either already implementing or want to implement, and they are working closely with all these communities, and they have a great network. Everything is there, but they don't know how to get the money, and they feel very overwhelmed because they just react. They see something, they do something, but they don't have the strategic plan. And once you have put that into place, you have guidance, you know where you're going, and that will give you a lot of direction. And here I always share my own fundraising history a little bit, because I had some very eye-opening moments in my own fundraising history about the importance of a strategic plan. Because when I started, I think I started similar to many of you. It was not my own community, but when I finished high school, after that, I went to South America to work in a project in Ecuador for a while. And I really loved the community. It was an agricultural community, and we wanted to implement projects concerning organic agriculture, protecting the forest, etc. And I formed my own organization, my own small NGO in Germany to support the projects in Ecuador. But it was the same. I didn't have a plan. I saw an opportunity, I jumped on it. I applied here, I applied there. And sometimes we had money, but then the money would run out, and we had a funding gap, and we couldn't continue. And there was just no proper approach behind it. And it stressed me out so much that after 5 years, I had to stop because I was just overworked and I couldn't figure things out. And then after coming to Nepal, I learned a much more strategic approach, and I learned how to develop a fundraising strategy. I learned how to put all these things together, and then it kind of cleared up for me as well that for the project in Ecuador, I could do the same. If we develop a strategy, if we develop a long-term approach to how we want to go about fundraising, not only go about our work, but go about fundraising, it would tell me what I have to do at what point, and it would give us some reliability in funding, etc. And that made our work so much better. So I was able to go back to it and go back to working with my NGO and actually doing the same work or having the same successes with much less stress. So for me, this was really eye-opening. That's why I'm really passionate about sharing this knowledge about the fundraising strategy as well, because it will change so much. Even though you might think, oh, we're good, we're managing, we can just go by like this. It's going to be so much easier if you are able to just follow a plan that you have mapped out with your team, and just do all those steps which are connected to your business plan, because that way you don't have to think about it all the time. And I also really like this quote, which is from a very famous book about fundraising. Sorry, I don't have the person who said it in here. It used to be in here, but I don't have it anymore. But the quote is, be a proactive fundraiser rather than a reactive grant seeker. And that's what I meant before. Oftentimes, if you don't have a strategy, you just constantly know, oh, we need money, we need money, we need money. So you go out, you look for a call for proposals, you see something, maybe you write a proposal, but to fit to that call perfectly. You have to change it a bit. Then if it's a success, then it's good, but then you move on. If it's not a success, then you have to go back. If you just search for stuff and react, that's going to be a problem in the long term, because you will need a lot of energy for that, and it kind of takes away agency from you. But if you're able to be a proactive fundraiser, if you can go out and do research and find grants that work for you and not change your program so that it works for the grants, you are going to be much more successful, because you will be able to implement your project work with much more focus and much more quality, because you don't have to spend that much time on trying to find grants, trying to adjust to what a donor wants, etc. So having a fundraising strategy, having a strategic approach will contribute to this shift from just being a reactive person to a proactive person, because that's what you want to be. You don't want to be forced to react to stuff. You want to be the one defining your next steps. So why do you need a fundraising strategy? What are the reasons beyond the stuff that I already told you? First of all, it's to avoid funding gaps, because as you know, if you have a grant, oftentimes we're very happy and we start implementing the project, and we think we know we will need follow-up funding, but sometimes this idea gets a bit lost and we are lost in project work, and then we don't think about it early enough. And then sometimes we run into a funding gap if we didn't plan out from the beginning how we want to finance a project long term. So that is a big risk, and funding gaps are horrible for project work, as you know, because you might have to let staff go. You have a gap in working with project participants. So some of the successes that you've had in the past might be lost again. So there are all those issues. So that is a problem. So you really want to avoid that. And usually a fundraising strategy should cover the next 3 years at last. So that gives you 3 years to prepare for the next funding gap that might be approaching, obviously, because if you plan everything out, you can already see in the future, oh, okay, in 2 years, this grant runs out. So now I already have to start working to find a replacement, to an extension, whatever the case may be. And the more time you have and the more strategic you can think about it, the easier it will be to avoid those funding gaps. Then a fundraising strategy will also put your funding on a more stable base. We will talk about the questions you have to ask yourself in a minute. And part of that is a SWOT analysis, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. And if you only have one funding source, that analysis will show you that that's high risk. Because as we've seen with COVID and some other of these developments in the last years and maybe even months, is if you just have one donor, it's very risky. You might lose them, because if you're just supported by one company and suddenly the company doesn't generate as much money anymore because energy costs are so high, and they say, oh, we will stop supporting you, you have a big issue. Or if you're just supporting on one government and then there's a political change, and they say, oh, we're not going to work with your kind of organization anymore. That's a huge risk. So if you really honestly look at your fundraising, one of the results will probably be that it's better to have different income sources and to have a more stable base, less risk in your fundraising. So if you look at those things and make those decisions, then having a fundraising strategy will lead to you putting your funding on a more stable base, because you will be based on, you will have different income sources, and if you lose one, you will not be left with nothing. The third point here is also crucial, particularly when you work with a bigger team. If you have a fundraising strategy, or when you have a fundraising strategy, you will know who has to do what and when. Because you probably all know those meetings that we tend to have, where we sit around a table and we talk about a topic and everybody agrees, oh, we have to do this and we have to do that. And then everybody leaves and kind of files back into their own offices, and all the things that we talked about will not get done because we didn't assign responsibilities. And it's the same with fundraising, specifically sometimes, I think, because nobody really feels responsible for it. So everybody knows the steps that need to be done, but nobody does them. So a big part of a fundraising strategy is to develop action points and actual responsibilities that you assign to team members. So when you have a fundraising strategy in the end, you will have a couple of pages of action points that say, by next April, Janet has to do this. By next June, Mike has to do this. And then everybody knows what they have to do. And then when things do not get done, at least you can go back to Janet and go back to Mike and say, well, why did you not do this? Where's the issue? And you can actually move along with what you've discussed. So the strategy will really help you with assigning responsibilities and assigning roles, which is crucial to be a successful fundraiser. And it will also free up mental space for other tasks. And this might sound stupid to you, but this is what I meant before. When I was trying to fundraise without a strategy, I constantly had all these issues in my mind. I constantly was thinking about, maybe this money will run out on this project, or maybe is there a call, or I have to look here, I have to look there, I have to send this. And all this stuff was constantly on my mind, so that I got super overworked. And I also was not able to concentrate on project work anymore at all. But when you write everything down in a strategy, you attach this work plan with action points, you don't have to think about it anymore. You just have to think about the one step that you have to do today or tomorrow, and then you're done and you can move back to your project work or just to keep working on it or whatever the specific task might be. But it is written down in a plan, and you don't have to try to kind of catch it in your mind. You can let it go because it is written down, and that is a huge factor that you will see when you actually use it and do it. Not having to think about it and having a plan for it is going to free up a lot of mental space for you and your team, and you will be much more productive in the long run. So now I want to talk about who in your organization should develop the fundraising strategy, because that's also a question we tend to get. Because oftentimes when we convince or when we talk to board members or seniors and say, oh, you need a fundraising strategy, they say, oh yeah, okay, our fundraiser will write one. But that's not the way it works, unfortunately. It's the same on the general scale. Often seniors think if you're a fundraiser, you are solely responsible for the money and nobody else has to do anything for you. And you all know that's not the case. All of this is always a team effort. And the same goes for the fundraising strategy. So you should definitely develop the fundraising strategy in a team. It's a team effort because you need to get opinions, need input from everybody in your team. Because, like I said, the fundraising strategy needs to be heavily reliant on the business plan, on the project work. So you need your project managers to support you. You need all of that information. You need to talk to your seniors, to the board, to whoever decides the direction of your NGO, because you need to understand the next 3 to 5 years of plans for the future to be able to craft a good fundraising strategy to deliver on those goals. Because if you don't understand the goals, if nobody shares properly with you, then you cannot do anything. So you need everybody on board, and everybody has to contribute and come to the table with their knowledge. Also, obviously, we said before, you will assign responsibilities. So that also means everybody should be in the loop and be clear about their roles and responsibilities. So that means that they should be at the table when those responsibilities get assigned. Because in the example from before, if you put in your plan, Janet has to do this, but Janet doesn't know that she has this task, then it's worthless. It's best if everybody's on the table, at the same table, and can say, yes, I will do this, or no, I won't, because otherwise you're not assigning responsibilities. You're just randomly assigning tasks on a piece of paper. So everybody needs to be in the loop. And that also speaks to the importance of developing this in a team, because then everybody can have their input and everybody can support the development. And then you can also, if it's developed in a team, particularly with your seniors, make sure that everybody understands the importance of developing a fundraising strategy and also assigning resources towards it. Because again, if you assign responsibilities, if you need the support of a project manager or of some other staff members, and they don't have free time, or their seniors don't let them work for you, don't let them do the task, it's worthless again. Or if you decide that you want to use specific databases, specific tools for your resource mobilization, but you don't get the resources for that because they will cost money or cost you more time or stuff like that, again, it's not going to work. So everybody needs to be on the same page. And the easiest way to do that is to develop this in a workshop together as a team, because then everybody was involved in every single step, and everybody will be on board with this and will understand the importance of every single step that you talked about. So now we get to the second question I want to ask you. I would just love to know, how long do you think a fundraising strategy should be? Let me see if I can find the correct one. Start. Okay, I think you can see it now. How long do you think a fundraising strategy should be? Is it 1 page, or is it 10 pages? Would you say 40 pages? Or would you say it depends? Yeah, I'll just let it go for 2-3 more seconds if you want to give a guess. Okay. So 16% say 1 page, 30% say 10 pages, and 54% say it depends. And obviously, this is the kind of question where you don't have this one perfect answer. But I'm very glad that nobody said 40 pages. So that's already a great start, because a very common mistake that we see in fundraising strategies is that they are too long. You want to have a document that is used, and you want to have a document that people know. And if you have 40 pages, if you write a complete book, nobody will read it. Then you can launch it. You can say, well, we have this great strategy now, but then it will just sit on the shelf and nobody will look at it. And you want to create something that is actually has actual value, a real life value for your organization, and not something that will just collect dust and has many pages. So obviously it depends. 1 page can be correct, 10 pages can be correct, but we always recommend to aim for as little pages as possible, because you do want people to read it, to go back to it, to refer to it. That also means make it approachable. Another common mistake we see is that in all those internal documents, especially that happens with INGOs, they use so many abbreviations that you kind of have to have the glossar next to you to just understand the document. And again, that will keep people from reading it, from referring to it. And you want people to use it. It should be a document that is used, that is also shared with everybody, etc. So it should be approachable. So usually, if it's a 3-year strategy, if the time horizon, is 3 years, usually you will end up with 4 or 5 pages, I guess. But it depends a lot. 1 page is maybe a little bit too little, because you want to plan out the first year in quarters, like the first 4 quarters at least, with detailed action points, and with that you already cover a little bit more. But if you say just text, 1 page could already be enough, just describing where you're coming from, what you want to achieve, and how you want to achieve it, because those are the questions that are important, and we'll look at those in a bit. But yeah, just keep in mind that this strategy should be practical. It shouldn't be a full book that is pretty to look at, but nobody will actually use. So keep that in mind. Okay, so continuing here. So I already mentioned them, the 3 main questions that a fundraising strategy should answer. And it's very, very similar to the questions that any good strategy should answer. You start with the question, where are you today? So what is your fundraising today? Then you continue with where do you want to go? What are your fundraising needs? And you decide how you will get there. And those, the last part will then be accompanied by action points, by all this actual information about the steps that you want to and need to take. And again, it's important to understand the difference here, because when I do this in, we also run a lot of classroom trainings, particularly in Nepal. And I often give this as a task, and then people write down their organizational strategy instead of their fundraising strategy. So here, it is not meant that you describe exactly the project work you're doing today and the project work that you will do in the next 2-3 years. It means that you describe what your fundraising looks like today. Where does your money come from? What are your income streams? And then how much money will you need for the projects that you want to implement? So that's what I meant in the beginning. It is connected. This one is based upon the other because you need all that factual information, but they're not the same. So in those sections, you don't want to just describe the efforts you make with your organization, but you want to describe the monetary side of it. Like, how do you want to get that money? What are the instruments you want to use? What are the strategies, the approaches that you want to use to actually achieve this funding that this is all about? And also the how will we get there is about action steps, action points that you want to take to achieve those steps that you have defined. So I think I'm just, sometimes I click into the questions just to see if there's anything that I can address already now. So I think the one question here is, how different is the fundraising strategy from the normal organizational strategy, strategic planning? And I think this is, I just made this very clear. No, it's the difference between saying what the organizational strategy just says what are you doing today? What kind of project work? What kind of project work do you want to do in the next 3 to 5 years? And which steps, what do you need for that to implement that? And the fundraising strategy says, how does your fundraising look today? Where does your money come from today? How much money do you need for the projects that you described in your organizational strategy? And then how do you want to get there? Which instruments do you want to use? Which steps do you have to take to actually get that money that you then use to implement your projects? So I hope it becomes a bit clearer how those are connected, but also what the difference is, because they are not the same, obviously. So the first question that you ask yourself is, where are you today? And again, this means, where does your money, your funding come from today? And here it's crucial that you take an honest look at your organization. That you really look at the income streams that you have. Maybe you're getting grants, maybe you're also getting membership fees, maybe you're getting support from the government, maybe you are also running donation campaigns, crowdfunding, maybe you're working with organizations, with corporations. So you kind of have to line out all of those income sources. Where is your money coming from today? And you can also evaluate here. And that's what I mean with take an honest look. Is everything working well for you? Is every single instrument that you are using going to be useful in the future as well? Because one example that I always, or that I often see, is that many NGOs have big, what are they called? Like events. That they run, charity events, and they claim that that is one of their biggest income sources. But then sometimes if you really look at it and kind of budget out how much they spent for the event and how much donations they take in, it's not even that great. So then sometimes you have to reevaluate and see, okay, is this going to be useful for us in the future, or maybe we should adjust and change and maybe use different instruments. But on the other hand, it also it will also show you if you just have one income source. And I know that many NGOs that start out just have this one income source. But if you look at it in the long run, in the long term, that's actually dangerous, because you might lose that one income source. So all these things you can look at when you look at that question, where are you today? You can also use tools like the SWOT analysis that I mentioned before. So you look at where are your strengths, what is working very well, where are your weaknesses, where are opportunities, so maybe new instruments that you want to use, new channels that you want to use, and where are threats. So if you identify all of that, you will have a very strong first section of your fundraising strategy that you can then base your next steps upon. Because you want to take all those lessons learned, you want to take all that experience that you already have, and then kind of extrapolate from there into the future. Because then you have a section that defines where you want to go. And that means financially. So how much money do you need? And being kind of specific here is important, because oftentimes when we work with organizations and they say, yeah, we need money. How much money do you need? We don't know. We have this project, we have that, but we don't know the amount. We take what we can get, or stuff like that. And I understand where they're coming from. I understand why they would do that, but that again puts you in a position where you can only react to what others offer you. And you want to be proactive. You want to implement your own ideas. So it's always better if you have the time and if you have the framework to do so, to develop your own plans, budget them out as good as you can. It can be a ballpark figure, but you should know if your project is going to cost 10,000 or 100,000 or $1 million, because those is important information that you need to search for good partners, to decide about your strategy, etc. Because if you know that you're just looking for $10,000, you can maybe use individual donors, you can use crowdfunding, stuff like that. But if you know that you need 2 million, then that's not a good way to go. Then you have to go for grants, then you have to go for companies, etc. So this will define the way that you choose. So you need to know where you want to go. You need to know what kind of money you need, what kind of projects you do. So if you want to build something, like build a building, again, that will mean something very different for your fundraising structure, because you will get money from specific organizations and not from others. So you need to have that information. And this part is strongly based on your business plan, on your organizational plan, like we said before, because here you draw from all your plans, from the information that you already have amassed there, and then decide how you want to move forward, and what you need, where you want to go in your resource mobilization. And then comes the most interesting part, which is the last part, where you decide how you want to actually get there. And this is where you decide which fundraising instruments you want to use. So do you want to apply for grants? Do you want to ask private donations? Do you want to ask for, do you want to address major donors? Maybe go for legacy donations, maybe go for corporations, ask the government for support, etc. There's so many different instruments that you can use in fundraising. This is where you decide which ones to use. So the information on which choice you want to make, or you can make, obviously again comes from the part before. So the amount of money that you need, the kind of projects that you want to implement, etc., informs this part of the fundraising strategy. You decide who you want to fundraise from, you decide which instruments you want to use, and then you work on your action points, because then you should attach, like we said before, you should attach a work plan to this entire document. A work plan that really details the next steps that you need to take for each instrument and who will do that. So for example, if let's say you decide that you want to apply for grants and that you want to run a crowdfunding campaign, then you need action plans for both of those tasks. You need to decide who will start a crowdfunding homepage, who will do our social media outreach, who will get pictures, who will work on the project descriptions, who will do the updates, etc. So those are all tasks that you have to assign in your work plan, in your action points. If you look at the other one that we said, you want to apply for grants, you need to do research. Someone needs to do the research. Someone needs to find potential partners. So they need to start using whichever tools, a database, other online search tools to find potential foundations, governments, bilaterals, etc., that might support you. Then you need someone to reach out to those potentials. It could be the same person, but you have to assign the task. Someone needs to reach out, talk to them, ask if they want to support, etc. Then someone needs to write a proposal, develop a proposal. All those things are action points that have a responsibility attached to it, and they need to be distributed. So that's what we mean when we say you should focus on the action points. You kind of have to make a work plan that, again, everybody discusses with you, everybody's clear about, and that everybody knows what their responsibilities are within this fundraising strategy. And then you can move about. So if you identify that you need $100,000 for the next 2 years for your projects, and then you start researching grants. And again, always you have to put in security. So every quarter or maybe every 6 months, you should discuss your fundraising strategy again, or your progress at least. You won't change the entire strategy, but you discuss the progress on the action points. And then you will see, we have identified 10 potential partners that would that fund this kind of work. We've talked to 5, with 2, we're going to present a proposal. Then you meet again after 3 months, and yes, this proposal went through or it didn't, but then all those tasks are lined out there and you move through them, and that will give you a lot of reliability and security in your resource mobilization. So this is what the last part is about. And obviously, the first year, so the first 4 quarters of the first year of your fundraising strategy should be in much more detail. And then obviously it's very difficult for you to plan what you want to do in 1 year, but then revisit it. Obviously, in every meeting that you have where you talk about these points, then make sure that you plan out the next quarter with more action points, with more responsibilities, with more tasks, so that you're sure that you move forward with the strategy and you actually use all the information, all the strategic approaches that you have developed with your entire organization, and implement them to make sure that that money gets in so that you can actually do your projects. So now we have a third question that is always very interesting for me. You've heard me talking about fundraising instruments. So for example, applying for grants, but also individual fundraising, crowdfunding, fundraising with corporations, etc. And I would just like to know if you use different instruments, or if you just use one, or if you're not sure about this. So I will share. Here we go. Share this questionnaire again, because it's always interesting for me to see if you're using different ones or if you rely mainly on one kind of source. Okay, so I think we can finish here. So almost 60% say yes, different fundraising instruments. So that's great. And 24 say no, and 9% are not quite sure. So like I said before, obviously, especially young NGOs I know often just have one funding source, which is a great way to start. But having different instruments, using different channels to get the money, also will add some layer of security. Obviously, it's not always an option. And it's also not, they won't be equal either, because if you get a grant of of 100,000 or even just 50,000 or 10,000, it's very difficult, for example, to replace that with individual donations. But it can be complementary. You can just have this variety of fundraising instruments that can complement each other and that can, build a little bit more stability and a little bit more reliability into your strategy. So this is always very interesting for me to see if you are already diversified or if you rely mostly on one kind of funding. Yeah, so one thing, just to staying with this last part, still the last part of the fundraising strategy, how do you want to get there? Some other things that you can do is this one thing to diversify your funding sources, because like I said, this will often add stability and add reliability to your resource mobilization. Also, getting familiar, now that we're focusing more on this grant writing part, because it's also our area of expertise, getting familiar with the funding landscape is a great idea. Also having this as action points in here. Answering calls for proposals, obviously very important, and networking with donors. Those are the steps that you will probably find in your fundraising strategy that you will have to implement, that you will have to go through to then be able to actually raise funding through grant writing. And if you're interested to learn more about those steps, we have online courses and webinars about all of them. So please check out philanthropia.org and also our YouTube channel to see more videos about these topics. These are a couple of steps that you will probably find in those action points. What would be next steps? Put your strategy into written form, obviously. I kind of assumed that, but it is important that you do that because you want to share it. It shouldn't be, it's great if you talk about it, but then definitely make the step to write it down. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look amazing and be designed, etc. It just needs to be a document. It is a living document, because you will adjust it, you will change it, you will add stuff to it, you will take stuff off of it. So it doesn't need to be like a perfect book form. But it should be in a written form so that you can share it and that you have that common ground to move on from. And attach a work plan. Really focus on those action points and make sure that everybody knows what their role is. Assign a budget. Also, that is important, because you might need some money for things like using a database and stuff if you want to research grants or setting up a homepage, setting up some stuff. But you also need resources from people. You need people's time if you plan to work with your marketing department or with your accounting department, etc. You will need the people, you will need their time, and that costs money. So you need to attach a budget. So if you know that some of the tasks, some of the work, the action points in your work plan need another team member or need a specific budget, then make sure that that is already in there, and that everybody who signs off on that plan also signs off on giving you that budget. And again, everybody needs to know who will do what and when. Because if you share with everybody the responsibilities, then things will get done. If nobody knows, or if nobody feels responsible for all those tasks, and it's very, very difficult to get through or to go through with everything and to have the same level of success that you would have if everybody's on the same page. Yeah, and the biggest advice that I can just give you is to focus on action points. Don't write too much, don't be too theoretical, don't go into too much detail when you're talking about the background of your organization, etc. Everybody knows what you're about. If they work for your organization. So you don't have to cover all of that. All of that is probably covered in your organizational strategy. But don't go into too much detail. Don't use too many words. Don't make it too complicated, but focus on the action points. Make it accessible for everyone and make it easy for everyone to understand what you're about, what you want to achieve, and who has which role to play, because then it's going to be much easier to actually fulfill those action points, fulfill those questions, those tasks that you have assigned. Yeah, and it's now in the end, just a couple of those links that I was talking about in the beginning. We also have an online course about developing a fundraising strategy. So it's a bit more extensive, obviously, than today. We have also a video, but a lot of reading material, and also included is a full proposal template that already tells you how to, or what to fill into which section, and the ultimate proposal checklist that will really help you with eligibility. And the usual price for this course is $79, but today, because you all endured this webinar until the end, we will give you a special price, and we'll sell it at 50% off at $39.50 only. So this price is valid, I think, until the weekend. So if you are interested in this, please jump on it and do it. The coupon code to get this discount is webinar 2023. And yeah, if you're interested in learning more, also learning some next steps already here about the full proposal template, etc., then this course is for you, and I really recommend you take it. We have a variety of other courses, like I've mentioned before, more broad topics like proposal writing, donor research, donor networking, but also very specific ones like how to develop a log frame, how to fundraise from the European Commission, stuff like that. So if you're interested in those, you can get 30% off with the coupon code fundraise of all of our courses. So if you use the coupon code fundraise, any course you find interesting, you will get a 35% discount on. We also have a couple of free courses if that's interesting for you. Just browse through our website, philanthropia.org, and you will find all of them, and you can sign up for any that you like. Thank you very much. Again, if you want to learn more, please make sure to check out the rest of our course program on philanthropia.org. And now we still have time for questions. Here's the address again. I'll leave it up here. And if you have any questions that you want to ask us, you can also send them to info@philanthropia.org. That's how you can reach us. Okay, now I will move to the questions that you've put in the box, and we still have 6-7 minutes time, I think. So the first question by Elizabeth is, does the fundraising strategy change annually or as the business plan evolves? Yes, that's a good point. You do have to adjust your fundraising strategy, obviously, especially if your business plan evolves, and it evolves at the same time. Also, you probably have to adjust on other things. If you want to apply for specific grants, then once the deadline is over, you will include the next one in the working plan or in the action points. Maybe, yeah, things change. We saw that with the COVID pandemic, everything changed also in fundraising, like from one day to the next, peer-to-peer fundraising, like face-to-face, it was just gone. So obviously many organizations had to adjust and to pivot from the situation that they were confronted with. So it is important to always adjust your fundraising strategy, especially if you change your business plan. But just moving forward, I would say you will look at it every quarter probably anyways, because you will talk about the action points, but then look at it again every year and see if there's stuff that needs to be adjusted. Some stuff can just be extended and stay in there, but look at it and see if anything needs to be changed. And there's another question. Alongside the strategy, is it important to develop a fundraising policy? And if yes, what's the format of a fundraising policy? I think that depends a lot on the organization. I know there's different aspects to that. I know, for example, that many organizations have a fundraising ethics policy. So from whom do we take money? How do we approach people? Which kind of pictures do we use so that we're not using beneficiaries, etc., stuff like that. Then there's other things included, like a financial policy. What kind of money can you accept? Like what kind of grants can you accept because of your legal background, stuff like that. It depends a lot on the organization, on your needs. So, but talking about ethics, for example, and putting that into some kind of policy, I think is great, because there's definitely people that you don't want to take money from, I'm sure. We've just had this issue in an organization that I'm working with, that they were discussing if they should take money from someone who was making their money by selling weapons. So they're selling weapons, or they're selling not even weapons, but they're selling like software for weapons. And then they want to give money to social projects that sometimes work in the same countries where those weapons are used. Is that ethical to take that money, or is it not? It's a complicated question, and that organization discussed it for a while and then found a policy. But those are things that you can obviously and should discuss and maybe put into the form of a policy. But that depends a lot on your organization, on your size, on things that your government, but also maybe donors require of you. So there's not one answer to that. I think you can adjust it a lot to your needs. Then there's a question, the theory of change in the fundraising strategy. Please elaborate. Theory of change basically is the way that an organization wants to change a topic or an area or a problem. Like, what is your vision? What is your mission? What do you want to achieve with your work? That is what the theory of change describes, like the model of change that you think that you are supporting. Like, what do you want to change in the communities that you work in or in the area? And what is your model behind that? What do you think is the impact theory that you are supporting? And the fundraising strategy, is the strategy on how you will attract money, how you will raise money to then do your project work, which will actually contribute towards achieving your theory of change. Then there's another question. Do you have any tips to get recognized by government resources to find stable funding in the future? We're still a young NGO, and how do we get the attention of the government to fund us? That often is a problem, and not only in developing countries. In Germany, we have the same thing. So I think networking, lobbying. I know in the US, lobbying is a bad word, but actually in Europe, it's used in a different way because it's actually something positive. So just talking about your cause and showing and inviting, like every time you have, you can show any successes in your project, invite someone from the government side and show them, say, look, we did this great work, and show them the benefit for them. Make very clear, like if you work in education, for example, that you are actually supporting them in something they are supposed to do. And try to be, if you have the opportunity to be on committees, to be on like the local committee for education in your community, stuff like that, try to be there and raise your voice to always advocate for your project. I think making those connections can often then lead to being included in government budgets and receiving funding from them. But it's a long game. It's not going to work in the short term. But obviously, making those connections, I think, is the only way to try to attract that kind of funding. Then there's a question about the instruments. I think, maybe it wasn't clear enough. So the difference is instrument means different ways of attracting money. So you can apply for a grant. That's one way. But you can also ask on Facebook. That's one way. That's another instrument. Like crowdfunding is an instrument. Online fundraising is an instrument. Peer-to-peer fundraising is an instrument. Major donor fundraising, so that means talking to rich individuals and asking them for support, is a fundraising instrument. So that's the kind of the division that we make because they need different approaches. If you want to apply for a grant, you write a proposal. But if you want to ask a major donor, like a very rich individual, for money, you wouldn't come with a proposal. You would talk to them differently. So that's why we make that distinction between different instruments or ways of fundraising. Then the implementation of a plan requires a committed team. Yes. How can one inspire action among a team that is not as devoted? Well, that's very difficult. But what we always recommend as a first step is to include those issues into every team meeting. So in every team meeting, you should have one to-do on the schedule that says fundraising or resource mobilization, and talk about it every single time so that everybody understands their role. Because often they think that fundraising should be done by the fundraiser and don't see their own responsibility in it, but everybody on the team has some responsibility for resource mobilization, because the fundraiser can't do it alone. Everybody has connections, everybody has a role to play. And just including this in every single meeting already raises the awareness, at least, that this is a constant thing that is going on and that needs support and needs input. But also, I think making clear how this all comes together, and the impact of successful fundraising on project work, just to make those connections clearer. And if possible, make sure that these things are also put in the terms of reference when you hire new people. If you already have a team, it's maybe a bit difficult, but having in the terms of reference something that says you have to support in fundraising also often already changes the perception of the people working in your team, because they know it's in their contract. So obviously it's better if someone is inspired by themselves to do the work, but oftentimes if it's in the description, then they are much more willing to actually do part of the work as well. So if you can negotiate that into contracts, that also helps sometimes. I think I'll take one last question. So we don't have a full template for a fundraising strategy, but I think if you go to, we have another website that is called proposals4ngos.com. When you go there, we have a lot of articles, texts about that as well. And I think we also have something like a couple of questions that guide you through the fundraising strategy, and that will be helpful. Yeah, I think those are most of the questions. The last question I can take is, what's the bare minimum of a fundraising strategy? The areas that must be in the strategy, I think everything that we covered today, it always just depends on how much detail you want to put in there. I mean, you need to know what you're doing today and what is working and what isn't. You need to know how much money you want to raise, what kind of projects you want to implement. Then you need to define steps for that. You can do that on 10 pages and you can do that on 1 page, but you have to cover those sections. Otherwise, your strategy, if it's not based on what you're already doing, you will have an issue. If it's not based on what you need in the future, you will have an issue. And if you don't have any action points, then you don't know what to do. So I think those 3 questions need to be covered. The level of detail, obviously, is up to everybody to look at. Okay, I think I covered most of the questions. I hope you agree. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. We are going to do these monthly again, and I think we have a couple of more things up our sleeve this year. So please stay tuned. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, that you follow us on social media. And yeah, if you're interested in any of those courses that I mentioned today, take us up on that chance, because this discount of 50% you will not get again soon. So take us up on the chance. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Thanks again for attending. I hope to see you in our next webinar again. And yeah, with this, I will say goodbye for today. Thanks again. Bye-bye.